Take it away, Paige.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thanks so much for your thanks so much for your patience. We're right on time, believe it or not. I'm happy about that. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Excellent. So, by raise of hands, how many of you have heard of notes or note investing? Oh, terrific. Terrific. Have any of you ever invested in notes?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. All right. So we've come for some information seeking. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Terrific. All right. Well, a little bit about me. Just you heard a kind of a brief scenario there, a brief bio about what I've done as a real estate investor. I have been an investor over 20 years. I have done just about everything there is to do in real estate investing. And for a large part of my career, I was focusing on all types of fixing and flipping construction, mostly ground up construction. I started in the late 1990s, early 2000s. I was young and we grew very, very. At one point, I had 36 employees. We held all of our licenses with the exception of HVAC and also roofing. And the reason that we didn't have those licenses is because the liability insurance was just too high. So we, of course, we're growing very fast and then went through the whole early 2000s and really started rocking and rolling in 2004, 2005, 2006. And then 2007 happened. And, it was an interesting time for anyone who was in real estate at that point in time. As everybody knows, there was the crash and lending just froze up completely across the board. And it had tremendous effect on just about everybody in every form of real estate. And the thing about it is that for me, I saw that it was coming and thought, oh, this isn't going to happen to me, because I was really only leveraged about 10%. And I was very fortunate. I had a lot of assets. I had cash. I had equipment. I had rental properties and all kinds of buy and hold properties. And I figured this isn't going to happen to me. But what I didn't realize is that because it wasn't happening to me, it didn't mean it wasn't going to happen to other people that owed me money. Okay. And so as a result, everybody else's lending froze up and they couldn't pay me. And when you're in new construction, if any of you know, generally you're footing the bill anywhere between 90 and 120 days before you're reimbursed by the person that you're doing the construction for. And so all of that froze up, and I got to a point where I had to tell 36 families that I couldn't employ them any longer. And we tried to make it work, and we sustained for a little while, but after that, we just couldn't. We had to close down. And that was a very difficult thing for me to do because I value people and I try and, I felt responsible. I felt responsible for their lives and their livelihoods. And we were really a family. So that was very, very difficult. And then, it got to a point that I had bills and investors that I had to pay. I had to pay people. And so I started fire sailing all of my assets. And it took me about 3 years. Every day I got up and I did not, I knew I wasn't going to have any money left over and I was basically working for free. But I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to pay everybody and I did not have to go through and complete a bankruptcy of any kind. I paid all of my investors. I paid all of my vendors. And at the end of the day, 3 years later, I walked away from Arizona without anything, no money, just kind of the shirt on my back. And I ended up losing $20 million. And I tell that story because I want everybody to, I used to wear that as a badge of shame. And I don't look at it that way now. I am very fortunate because I actually now look at it as a blessing. I was able to move back home. I met my husband. I was here for a family member that had some health issues. And had that not happened to me, I would not have been here for those things. And it really shaped me as an investor. So when I came back into real estate, it was very important to me to have a certain level of control, and it was very important to me to mitigate risk. And so when I came back into real estate investing, I thought, okay, what is this notes thing? And I started studying it, and the more I learned, the more I liked, because it really is a place where it's all about control. You can generate chunks of cash, you can generate streams of cash, you can have a short-term play, you can make it a long-term play. You decide those different factors and how you want to control and use this vehicle for your investing goals. And that was really, really important to me, clearly. I'm sure you can imagine. So for, that I tell that story because I often challenge people when we teach our workshops and when we talk to people to really sit down and figure out who you are as an investor and what your goals are and what needs, what does risk look like to you? Because that really is going to drive the vehicle you use for your investing purposes. So that being said, notes, what is a note? A note is basically a promise to pay. There's different types of notes. There's performing notes, there's non-performing notes, there's unsecured notes, and then there's secured notes. For me, I only invest in first position, non-performing notes secured by real estate. The bulk of my portfolio is focused on residential real estate, and I do have some multifamily and some commercial notes that we also buy, but the bulk of it deals with residential. Why non-performing? People think, oh my gosh, well, why do you purposely buy a note, which is basically buying the debt, on something with somebody that's not performing? And the reason that we do that is because we are often able to get a much larger discount for that note and thereby able to mitigate our risk because we're building in a cushion of equity. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, performing notes, of course, are just that. They are people that are paying on that particular note. Whether it be a credit card or a car, again, there's all different types of notes. I prefer real estate. And because I would much prefer to bank on a house than bank on a person. And that's just for me as an investor. So first position, non-performing, secured by residential real estate is typically our focus. We typically focus on values anywhere between $50,000 and $200,000. And the reason that I say that is because that's kind of our sweet spot. We end up buying notes based on a discount based on the current market value of the property. We don't buy notes based on the unpaid principal balance, okay? We buy based on the current market value as it sits right here and now, value of the property. And generally we will discount it quite largely. It used to be we could buy those notes, at about 46 to 50 cents on the dollar. So if the property itself has a current market value of $100,000, we were able to buy it for the note between 46 and 50 cents, or $46,000 and $50,000. Nowadays, the notes have gone up a little bit, so we're generally anywhere between 55 and 62 or 63%. So that same $100,000 property value, we would buy that note anywhere between $55,000 and $63,000. But it still generates quite a large cushion of equity. And when we have that cushion of equity, we can really mitigate risk. Okay, we do not buy on unpaid principal balance. A lot of note investors make that mistake of doing that. And the reason that we don't do that is because if the market does drop, generally speaking, these notes are already underwater. So we don't want to have our borrower, we don't want to overpay for the note and get ourselves into trouble, okay? Make sense? So far, so good? Yes? Okay, awesome. So, again, non-performing gives us that ability to buy at a discount. And when we're buying at a discount, we're mitigating risk. We also generally, for us, and I want to point out that note investing is really, it doesn't fit in a box, okay? It's really, we give you a baseline, and then it's just a matter of data points and moving those data points to fit us as an investor. We always fit the deal to us. We don't ever fit ourselves to the deal. You can get yourself into trouble if you desperately want a deal and you think that this note looks great. You can manipulate the numbers and create a deal, and that's not something that you want to do. You really want to make sure that you fit that deal to your criteria so you mitigate your risk, okay? Let's see. So how do we make money buying something that's non-performing? That's always first and foremost on people's minds. How we do that is twofold. Number one, we know who we are as investors and we know what criteria we want to look for, all right? The first step, of course, is buying that non-performing note. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. Forgive me. We buy that, that non-performing note at a discount, and that builds in a cushion of equity. We also make sure that we are aware of any delinquent taxes or something that's going to affect our bottom line. And we do a tremendous amount of due diligence, all right? We do 2 sets of free due diligence, and then we have a paid round of due diligence. And when we do that, we look for certain criteria and make sure that we have a specific, at least our square footage wise, we generally don't buy notes that are on houses that are secured by houses that are anything less than 850 square feet. We don't buy anything that's less than 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. We don't buy in counties that are less than 50,000 population. And the reason that we don't do that is because when you start buying notes that are secured by houses that don't fit and conform to those parameters, you're going to really limit your buyer's pool. So if you end up with a note that ends up with you as an REO property, meaning you foreclosed on it or you've taken possession of the property as a deed in lieu of foreclosure, then you're going to have a problem selling it. So it fits my investing criteria to be able to turn our capital in our note investing within a 12-month period of time, okay? Other note investors like to hold on to properties. I actually kind of do both. We'll end up with the property and we will end up putting an end user in there and become their bank and start monthly cash flowing that way. And we'll talk about a couple of exit strategies here in just a moment, all right? So because we build in that cushion, we have a variety of different controls and opportunities to work either with our borrower or if the property happens to be vacant, then we have a couple of other options. Now in note investing, we generally have, there's about 23 different exit strategies. And when you have that many exit strategies, of course, you're going to be able to mitigate your risk because you can hedge your risk on just about any condition that comes through in the market, which is great. But we generally only use 4 exit strategies. The first one is my least favorite, and that's foreclosure. Everybody knows what a foreclosure is. We generally will buy, it doesn't matter if it's a judicial or a non-judicial foreclosure state. Obviously, everybody prefers a non-judicial foreclosure state because the times to foreclose are somewhat limited or more limited. They're sooner, they're quicker. And then the judicial foreclosure states, because you have to receive court approval, those typically take a little bit longer. So a non-judicial foreclosure state takes anywhere between, let's say, 3 and 6 months. And then a judicial foreclosure state is anywhere between 8 and 12 months. But we don't limit ourselves. I don't limit us to any kind of, we don't stick to just non-judicial. We buy in both judicial and non-judicial foreclosure states. And then there's the next exit strategy is a short sale, and everybody knows what a short sale is. We can agree with the borrower and work with the borrower if they don't want to stay in their home and they happen to have another buyer, or if they just say, would you be willing to accept a short sale? We can list it with our realtor. We will choose the realtor, and we'll work with that realtor to get the property sold. Now, understand, let's say the borrower owes $100,000 on the house, but the house is currently only worth $80,000, and there's a rearage because, again, these people haven't been paying for 2 or 3 years. So they might owe a collective balance of $120,000, but the property, again, is only worth $80,000. So they're already $40,000 in the hole. With somebody like me coming in, if we can buy, and we're going to use really easy math tonight, please. That same $80,000 that's the current value of the property, we'll end up buying that note for about $50,000, and that's just easy math. Like I said, we're more toward the 55 plus percentage, but for easy math tonight, let's say 50%. So we'll buy it at $40,000. Now, if the borrower comes to us and says, well, I have somebody that's willing to pay $80,000 in a short sale, how fast do you think I'm going to say yes? Pretty fast, because we only paid $40,000 for it. And we can be in and out of that note, anywhere from, in a few months. So that's something that gives us the opportunity when we buy a non-performing note, because we build in that cushion of equity, it really gives us the opportunity to still make profit and help somebody out of a really nasty situation, okay? So that's the short sale. Deed in lieu of foreclosure is just that. When our borrower comes to us and says, would you, Mr. Bank, or would you, Paige, be willing to take the deed to my property in lieu of foreclosure as payment in full for my loan? We will say yes on the condition that our due diligence has shown us that there are no junior liens behind us that are detrimental or that don't make sense if we end up having to pay them. Because understand, in a deed in lieu of foreclosure, we take the property as payment in full. So our loan goes away. There's no more loan. So anybody who's behind us, they all move up a step, okay? So we need to do our due diligence very well and make sure that we are aware of any delinquent taxes, any municipal liens, any judgments that our borrower may have that travel with the property, any second mortgages, things like that. And if the numbers make sense for us to take it as a deed in lieu of foreclosure and end up either paying those liens off or negotiating them down, then we still do the deal. We just make sure that we're aware of them, because if you get caught without knowing that, then that could be a pretty detrimental oops to your investment dollars. So again, really extensive due diligence, but short sales end up working out very well. Now, in terms of my favorite, that's the reperforming. That's the fourth strategy we typically use. We end up with working hand in hand with our borrower. Oftentimes, when the borrower is defaulting on a loan, it's not because they're bad people. It's just they had life happen to them. And I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have life happen to you. So that's actually our favorite strategy. We really prefer to be able to keep borrowers in their home if they qualify. Now, in a reperforming situation, we will work with them and say, we'll ask what kind of, we can do all kinds of different things. We can modify their payment. We can modify their interest rate. We can modify the length and term of their loan. We have a lot of flexibility to work with them and turn a profit at the same time. So, for instance, let's use that same $100,000 unpaid principal balance and $20,000 in arrearage, and the property is only worth $80,000. Now, keep in mind, simple math, we're into this note for about $40,000, and then we build in some workout costs, kind of like rehab costs for a house. We build in rehab costs for our note, and generally they're only between $5,000 and $6,000 for a 12-month period of time. So we will talk to our borrower and ask them, okay, if you would like to stay and if they do qualify, we'll take their $800 a month payment and we'll reduce it temporarily. We do it under a forbearance agreement. I don't ever permanently modify a loan until the borrower has proven themselves for a period of time. So we will do a forbearance agreement. We will modify their payment down. We will require that they come up with a small reinstatement fee. Generally, it's going to be anywhere between $2,500 and $5,000. And somebody who wants to stay in their home, believe me when I tell you that if we ask them for a reinstatement fee, they will come up with it, okay? So we require the reinstatement fee. And then we will say to them, okay, now we need to incentivize them. So they come up with a $5,000 fee. We've reduced their $800 payment a month to maybe $700. And then we maybe lengthen the term of, the length of their loan, something along those lines to be able to help them. We now will incentivize them to pay on time every time for the next 12 months. And how we do that is this. We will tell them that in this forbearance agreement that if they pay on time every time for the first 4 to 6 months, then we will take half of that underwater, the arrearage and the overage of the current market value of the home, and we will cut it in half. So we will take $20,000, boom, right off the top. People would be are always very motivated to continue to pay on time every time if they know that at the end of the day, $20,000 in debt is going to go away. Okay, just for doing what they said they were going to do anyway. And then the next 4 to 6 months, if they pay on time every time, we'll wipe out the other half. So now we've brought their mortgage down to a manageable level, right? They're now at an $80,000 level. We've seasoned the note, and we will now put a permanent modification in place because they've proven themselves. Now for us, so they now have a manageable mortgage. They have pride of ownership. They get to stay in their home, and we make a profit. And how we make our profit is this. We've generated the $5,000 reinstatement fee in the beginning, and then we've cash flowed at $700 a month for 12 months. And then at the end, we can do one of two things. Actually, we can do several things, but we can either stay and let it cash flow for us for however long the borrower decides and however long we decide to continue paying before refining, or we can help the borrower to refi our loan out and we will collect our $80,000. Now you remove the $45,000 that were into it, and we've now pretty much almost doubled our money. So it's a great strategy. It's a win-win all the way around, and really this is the type of real estate investing that actually keeps people in their homes instead of trying to kick them out of their homes. Now, clearly, not everybody qualifies. There are people that know how to work the system, and if they've already got lots of modifications, or if they filed for bankruptcy and never completed the bankruptcy, several times, then we're not really going to offer them that exit strategy. We will, however, still treat them with respect and dignity, and hope that they will work with us to expedite an exit out of that property. And oftentimes we'll incentivize them. It might be cheaper for us to give them $1,000 in cash for keys or pay for their moving expenses, especially in judicial foreclosure states, so we don't have to pay the attorney. We would much rather give the borrower some integrity and leave with dignity, and some cash in their pocket, and reduce our timelines as well. Because time is our most valuable asset. It absolutely is. It's the only thing that once gone, we can never get back. So we really treat people as we would want to be treated, but at the same time, we've got to keep our business hat on our head, because we aren't charity. But we do try and create win-win situations for everybody involved. Let's see. All right. Bad notes. I often say that there's no such thing as a bad note, but I do say that there is such a thing as buying notes badly, okay? There is a tremendous amount of due diligence that goes into the process prior to buying any kind of non-performing note, any kind of note period, but especially a non-performing one. We need to make sure that it conforms to our guidelines, meaning our values it fits within our values, our current market values. It fits in our bed and bath. It fits in our square footage. It fits in our county population. We make sure that we have no liens, or if we do have liens, that the numbers will still work. Delinquent property taxes, municipal and code violations. Oftentimes, the county will run their own district, meaning their own sewer district or their own water district. And if there are unpaid bills from our borrower for whatever reason, sometimes that flows not with the borrower, but with the actual property. So if we're not aware of those bills, if we take that property back as an REO, now we're on the hook for them. So we've got to make sure that we're at least aware of them, and that the dollars match the deal. And then if the numbers work, then great, we'll still do the deal. But if they don't, then we obviously won't. But unless you know those things and those questions to ask, then you could really get yourself into some trouble if you buy a note and you don't do your due diligence steps. We also always have boots on the ground. We always have boots on the ground, drive by and take real-time photos of the house, because that's the collateral securing your investor dollars. I know a couple of note investors that relied on Google Earth, and they did so because the aerial shot was just a month old. And unfortunately, they didn't have somebody drive by the property and take pictures. And sure enough, the property had a fire and it was burnt down to the ground. And because this particular note investor didn't do his due diligence, he now basically had a worthless note. Because the house, he could have sold, he ended up selling it for land value, but he took a total loss because, the house was the primary investment security. So always have boots on the ground, drive by that house, whether it's a realtor or a friend or a fellow investor or somebody on bigger pockets, doesn't matter, whoever, or a paid service. There's actually a service out there called We Go Look. WeGoLook.com, and you can actually pay somebody to go out there and drive by. It's you just make sure that there's the structure there, because otherwise you can get yourself into some trouble. So, again, there's a lot of due diligence steps that we go through, way too many to list this evening, which is why we often will talk about that at the workshop. We have very detailed, steps that we give you, but it's a huge part of note investing. When you're fixing and flipping, you have a little due diligence up front, and then it's the main work comes in the middle and the end. It's very kind of middle to back end loaded. Note investing is very front end loaded. Also in this space, you deal, I call it the gentler form of investing, because while there is competition, it's not nearly the competition like you experience when you're in the fix and flip market. If any of you, I'm sure plenty of you have seen or been involved in bidding wars or, being outbid by thousands upon thousands of dollars, it's crazy in California, I can tell you that. And the margins are very, very thin. In this space, there is competition, but it's a lot gentler. We're not outbidding everybody. It's not a frenzy. It's a very dignified, simplified way of doing things. We make our indicative offers, and the asset manager either agrees or counters or accepts or rejects. But in this space, a lot of the investors are very collaborative. So there's really, even though there's competition, it's more collaboration than competition, which for my demeanor, I prefer. Asset managers, and I call them collectively asset managers. We typically buy notes from banks, hedge funds, other note investors, brokers, just about anywhere that we can get our hands on a tape. It's called a tape. The tape is really just an Excel spreadsheet that has all of the different assets that are for sale. And if we can, make a deal happen, great. I will say that in this space particularly, reputation is everything. It's absolutely everything. And if you don't do what you say you're going to do, you're going to find yourself very quickly not getting a lot of tapes. So if you make an indicative offer to an asset manager, you need to have cash. You need to have the cash ready to deploy and to purchase that note. And if you say you're going to purchase it and you don't purchase it, you should have a reason why. These hedge fund managers and all these asset managers really do not like their time being wasted. They are very particular about who they deal with. And once you establish a reputation, though, you will find a lot of free-flowing deals coming your way because you do what you say you're going to do. Let's see, what else? Do we have any questions so far?
I do.
Okay.
You kind of answered a little bit, but back to your range of your 50,000 and 250,000.
Yep.
How do you find the deal to get the person to take the 63 to 65% of the value, the current market value, versus what's left on the note?
How do you? I missed the middle part. How do you
get the person to take the 63 to 65% value of current market value versus the remaining note on the mortgage?
You mean the asset manager to accept the price for that?
Yes.
For that big a reduction?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so your borrower, the actual owner of the house, your borrower is not going to know how much you paid for their note, okay? They're just going to know they get a hello and a goodbye letter. So the only thing they know is that their note has been sold. Have you ever, had a mortgage where you get a letter that says, "Hi, your new bank is." Same thing. So they're not going to know how much you spent for their note. But the asset managers, that's all part and parcel of this space. When you develop that relationship with an asset manager, you ask them for pricing guidance. Some asset managers will tell you, well, give it your best guess or give us your best and highest. And then some asset managers will tell you what's called a strike price. They will tell you, we won't take any less than $40,000 for this note. And you just kind of work the numbers from there. If what we do is we generally will ask for pricing guidance, and we've gotten to know our asset managers quite well. So we will make our indicative offers based on our experience with them, or they will give us strike prices. And if they don't, then we will go toward the lower range. We'll start out our bids nowadays around 56.5%, which seems to be kind of a nice median. And the asset managers know to come back to us and say that works, that doesn't work, et cetera. Now we'll take that range, and then if there's any delinquent property taxes or municipal liens that are against it, or code enforcement fines, then we'll reduce our offer price by that dollar amount. So we'll end up at 56.5%, and then we'll reduce it by whatever the delinquent property taxes are from that point. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. I saw a couple other hands. Anybody else so far? No? Wow, I must be doing well. Okay. Financing. Oftentimes people ask me, can you finance notes? And the answer is no, not typically. Unless you're a huge hundreds of millions of dollars hedge fund that can get a warehouse line of credit. For the most part, no, you can't finance your notes unless you're doing it with a private party that is particular to you. You pay cash. There is a process that we go through. It's not like buying a house when you're in escrow. You close escrow and you get the keys. In this space, we have a closing date, and then we have what's called a cutoff date, and that's governed by the purchase and sale agreement. Now, when we have the purchase and sale agreement and we close, it does take a little while for the bank to send us the hard copy collateral file. Oftentimes these banks and these hedge funds have them with their custodian, and that is off-site for them. So they order up the file, and it will take anywhere between 30 and 45 days typically for us to get the hard copy collateral file. And when you first buy your very first note, I'll tell you that first 30 days is the longest 30 days of your whole life because sometimes it takes a while for the banks to get those files to us, and you've already wired your funds. If somebody asks you in this space, if somebody asks you for proof of funds, they're new because in this space it's assumed. From all of the asset managers, they assume that if you are bidding on assets that you actually have the cash to close, okay? They will not ask you for a proof of funds. They will ask you to close once you get to a point that they've drawn up the PSA, the purchase and sale agreement. If you don't, you might get away with that once, but you won't get away with it twice. You won't have asset managers sending you any tapes. It's really important to protect your reputation here and to do what you say you're going to do. And if you don't, then you need to have a reason. And what I mean by that is if you have engaged a realtor, like we often do, to go out and take pictures for you and do a CMA report, so they're giving you comparative analysis, and they're, the bank has their own version of how much that property is worth, and oftentimes the bank is too high. But if we can go back to them with the realtor and our pictures and say, listen, your BPO, your broker price opinion is way too high. Here's what local boots on the ground, the local experts are saying, and here's the proof, then you might be able to get that asset manager to reduce the amount of money to buy that note. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll just say no, and then you move on. Once you secure an agreed upon price, then you go to your paid due diligence. And we order what's called an O&E report, which stands for ownership and encumbrance. And that will give you all of the different liens, judgments, mortgages, assignments of mortgages, and a few other things, a bunch of information for you about that property and about that borrower. Okay, and it's a tremendous resource for you in terms of everything that's going on that's attached to not only that borrower, or not only that property, but the borrower as well. And then once you have that due diligence step done, then you go to the PSA agreement, you sign it, and then you fund. A lot of times new note investors will get cold feet and they'll get scared, and at the end they sign the purchase and sale agreement and then they don't wire the funds. And I'll tell you that the asset managers will only do that once or twice. They won't do it again, and you'll get another tape. And believe me when I tell you, this space is very small. They all know each other, and they talk. So, if you back out, then have a good reason. Have a good reason. Let's see. Let me see what else. Another question I get oftentimes is, why do I focus more on notes as opposed to buy and hold rentals? And that answer for me is very, very easy. When you're the bank, because when you buy the debt, you become the bank. So when you become the bank and something goes wrong with that particular property, like the air conditioning breaks or the toilets leak all over the place, then they don't call you. Your borrower does not call you because you're the bank. You're not a landlord. They will call the air conditioning repairman. If you're in a landlord situation, of course, they're going to call you, and it's going to or your property manager. But any way you shake it down, the money for the repair is going to come out of your pocket, not theirs. And in this scenario, being the bank, the money stays in your pocket. And that's just a lot more exhilarating and not quite as stressful as having to deal with tenants and toilets. So that's often, that's why I much prefer non-performing notes over rentals. Now I will say this, when you deal with notes, most often, and I am not an accountant, but I would suggest if you want to come into this space, certainly talk to your tax professional and figure out what kind of tax implications you may or may not have. Strictly because when you're dealing with notes, the income that you derive is it's income. And so oftentimes, if you're investing just as an individual, as opposed to an LLC or some sort of entity, you may be subject to short-term capital gains. Again, I'm not a tax professional, so I strongly urge you to seek guidance and counsel from your tax professional, but keep that in the back of your mind. So if you need a depreciating asset, that's where you want to offset the income you derive by investing in notes, by having maybe one or two pieces of actual depreciable property, or at least an entity where you can offset that income with some write-offs. And that's just my opinion. Again, seek guidance and counsel from your tax professional. But other than that, it can be a very lucrative way to go. And certainly, if you're really wanting to fix and flip, it's kind of the backdoor way of obtaining properties. And if that's your passion, if that's what you want to do, you might choose to focus on vacant properties because they're a little bit easier to foreclose on in terms of not having to kick somebody out of their home. So that's a thought as well. Let's see. The most rewarding part of being a note investor for me. Again, for me, it's very important because I've been there and what I went through in 2007, I really, really enjoy being able to help somebody stay in their home. We've been very, very blessed that out of every 10 notes, we end up in a third reperforming, a third end up in foreclosure, and a third end up in either short sale or deed in lieu. But for those thirds that end up in a reperforming situation, we've gotten letters from single moms that have a couple of kids that have thanked us profusely for paying attention. And this one particular mom was really struggling, and the big banks beat her up, for a couple of 2-3 years. And when we came in on scene, she had all but given up hope, and she was just waiting for the being foreclosed on. And when we offered her the opportunity to reperform and stay in her home, she just was she wrote us this amazing letter, and I'll never forget it. So, she thanked us because her kids got to stay in the same school, and she didn't have to try and find another job in a place that she could afford. She didn't have to uproot herself, and she was tremendously grateful. And for me, that was hugely rewarding. Because we got to help somebody, and that's my focus. That's how we always enter in with the exit in mind, and that is my preferred exit. You also got to realize that on the other end of this, there's always a heartbeat. There's a heartbeat in every home, and these people are not necessarily bad people. It's just life has happened to them. So it offers me the opportunity to help people to generate communities and work with people in their communities. That pride of ownership comes back to life, and it helps the community as well. And I get to make a profit doing it. So that for me is the most rewarding part. Let's see. What else? Are there other questions? Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
Yeah, do you need to have any type of license, like any type of securities license for what you're doing? And then also, my other question would be, do you repackage and sell your notes?
Okay, I heard the first one. You might have to come closer for the second one, but I don't have a securities license. I don't need a securities license. Some states you have to be what's called a registered debt buyer. But for the most part, you can be a note investor in just about all 50 states. And just check which state, if you're focused on one or two, just make sure that the local laws don't require you to be a registered debt buyer. Securities licensing, only if you start up a hedge fund, you're going to be required to, if you want to pool funds from other investors, you're going to be required to start a PPM, offer a PPM. And have a fund where you disclose everything. We currently are in the process of building our fund. We do work with individual investors one-on-one, and we've been very successful thus far to do in doing so. We're very particular, though. Again, when you talk to people about money and put people with emotions together with money, it's very often like a marriage. And for me, and for my team, we date our investors. We don't just jump into that marriage. It's really important that you don't pool money, because that is selling a security, and we don't want to do that. The SEC will come down on you very hard and fine you and take all of your stuff. And the fines are typically about $250,000, so be very careful. But we do joint venture with people, and we've been hugely successful because we are particular. It's not just about the money. It's about an alignment of goals and realistic expectations and outcomes. So I didn't hear the second part of your question, though.
Do you repackage your notes and resell them to other investors?
Do we repackage them? Yes. Sometimes we will keep them for our own portfolio. Sometimes if we season a note and get them to reperform, then we will actually turn around and sell them for a small discount to other note investors that are looking for performing notes. Sometimes we will take an REO. If we end up with a property as an REO, then we will either sell it to perhaps a fix and flipper and carry the paper for them, or sometimes we'll just sell it to them outright. So there's so many different exit strategies that are at your avail, such that you can mitigate your risk, and that's largely why I love being in this space. Yeah.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Other questions?
You answered it with this first question. You answered my question. I don't have one.
Oh, terrific. Okay. Yeah, it's, go ahead.
No, please. Wow, okay. Oh, I know you mentioned like where you go to get the notes, whether it be hedge funds, banks, or private investors, but how do you find the notes? Like, I know you have a huge stream coming to you, but for starters, like, how do you go find it?
It's a little tough sometimes when you first start out, although nowadays this space is becoming, even though it's still really a niche market, it's becoming more and more available. The resources are becoming a lot more available. So if you're brand new and you want to start sourcing notes, I'm sorry?
Somebody called.
Listening to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, terrific. If you're looking to resource notes, LinkedIn is a tremendous way for looking, for asset managers or other note investors. Bigger Pockets is a great service. It's free, and there is a pro version, a paid version where you can actually participate in some of the forums, but there's some tremendous podcasts out there and connections through Bigger Pockets. You can go to Meetup. Believe it or not, there's a lot more subgroups these days for note investors. And then there's conventions. At the end of this month, there's a convention called Paper Source, and it's in Las Vegas, and it's perfect for new note investors because you're sitting in a room with existing note investors, asset managers, and there's no selling. So there's no selling allowed from the stage. So they're not going to say, hey, run back to the back of the room and, whip out your credit card. There's none of that is available at Paper Source. So it's a great convention, especially for those that are new, looking to make connections with asset managers and other note investors. It's a tremendous resource. And then we just had what's called Noteworthy, which is the Note Investor Summit. That just passed. And then a little higher level is called IMN, Information Management Network, and that's coming up in California. That one is pretty high end. It's relatively expensive, but it's got a tremendous amount of asset managers there as well. So, seek out different conferences. You will find other note investors. There are some asset managers that are available, some hedge funds actually that sell online. One of them is Watermark, and Val Sotir is the manager of that particular hedge fund that sells online. He's a great guy. He's very often available to answer questions. But honestly, unless you educate yourself, and I strongly urge people to educate themselves on the process because you can get hurt if you don't know the steps to take. So either study with somebody, go online. If you're interested in more information, you can reach out to me. If you send me an email to Paige, Paige, at cashflowchick.com, like the back behind, other side behind me. Paige at cashflowchick.com. I'm more than happy to send you a bunch of information and some resources that you can go to kind of further along your note education.
Where did you come up with the capital to get started?
That's a great question, because clearly I had to make some up, didn't I? Yeah. Yes, honestly, I had a little bit of my own capital, but I talked to everybody that I knew. I was very fortunate that I had a mentor who became my business partner, and I was able to leverage some of his resources. But the truth is that I really just talked to everybody that I knew, and I had a gentleman in my sphere of influence that was an investor with me before, back in 2007, and before that. And because I paid him off, I went to him again and I said, are you interested? I'd like to start out, with $100,000. And I'd like to buy a couple of notes on my own. And I ended up JVing with my mentor so I would get some experience, and he had some skin in the game and I had some skin in the game through this loan with my other investor. So that's why I say you can fund them via a loan if it's within your own sphere of influence, if it's somebody that you know. And I was very fortunate. He loaned me the $100,000, and I paid him back a decent rate of return. And that's how I got my start. And now we do both. We use other people's capital, of course, because, you know, we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars, and our money is in the market. And it's always moving and flowing and rotating in and out of assets. And so we cap out at a certain period, you know, a certain point. And so we do use other people's money. Like I said, we do use investors where we have a very frank many conversations. We do go through a little dating time. And if it's a good fit, then we'll proceed forward, and they can, you know, use our assets, leverage us and our teams and our resources to be profitable in this business.
So is there a particular number of investors that you limit yourself to when you're dating these investors before you decide to join venture with them?
Yes, I mean, well, of course, when I started out, we were able to take people that had a limited amount of funds, you know, that maybe just buy one note at a time. And I'm very lucky. I'm very, very blessed. I'm very conservative, and I do our due diligence extensively. And I've never lost money on a note. Not one, nor has my business partner, who was my mentor, who started before this. But I also believe in the law of averages, and statistically, I have a feeling that at some point there is going to be a loss. So we have taken steps to kind of prevent that. And what I mean by that is, if we're JVing with people one-on-one, we do have a threshold that they have to meet, and we have to have room. You know, right now we're pretty close to our maximum, but we also are in the process of setting up our fund. And the reason that we're doing that is so that people that don't necessarily have the dollar amount to meet our threshold, they can still participate with us and have the safety of being in numbers, right? So with the funds, you know, we'll be able to pool funds to be able to buy a multitude of notes, so that one, you know, God forbid, that one person who could only buy one note won't be hurt. So I know that's kind of roundabout to answer your question, but yes, we do kind of max out, because the only thing we can't make more of is time. And my primary job is to make sure that my investors' dollars are protected. So.
During the time that you hold a non-performing note, do you carry insurance on the property?
Do we, what with the property?
Carry insurance on the property, because you referenced a house that had burned down, so.
That's a great question. Okay, so yes, actually in note investing, we have the legal right when you buy the debt, because we are collateralized by the property, we do what's called force placing the insurance. So we transfer the funds to our asset manager to purchase the note, and my very next phone call is to my insurance guy, and I force place insurance. So we have the legal right to protect the property that's securing our invested dollars. And so we put the insurance in place. We also, if the property is vacant, have the right to have property preservation go, buy the property, board up any windows that may have been broken, change the locks, and secure it. We can't go in and rehab it. Not that I want to, because I really don't, but we can't go in and rehab it, but we can secure it. We can protect it, and we do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Questions?
So you talk about doing due diligence. Do you hire attorneys to do this, or title companies, or do you research it yourself?
Great question. I prefer, you can outsource the due diligence. I do often, when we're teaching our workshop, I tell people, listen, you've got to do your due diligence at least twice, because if you outsource it and they give something back to you, you're not going to know what you're looking at. So I strongly urge people to at least do it twice. For us, again, my number one job is to protect my investors' dollars. So we do the due diligence all the way through the process. I do have teams in place to do that. And we will do the initial due diligence. And then once we purchase the note, we have in place our loss mitigation teams, our servicing companies, our property preservation, and then we manage the managers they're the ones that handle all of that. And by the way, we don't ever talk to borrowers directly. We have loss mitigation teams to do that. So we board the note with them. And they are the ones that conduct the borrower outreach because they are licensed debt collectors and they know the right things to say. And they keep really extensive, detailed call logs and logs of communication. And it's well worth the $50 a month that we pay them to do that. So, yeah.
So how big is your team now? I know you mentioned before you had 36 families that you...
So I'm so sorry, it's really low. What now?
How big is your team
No.
that you work with now? You talked about 36 families before. I mean,
Yes.
So what do you have now that you work with?
Okay, so our loss mitigation team is a completely separate company. So we typically don't have employees. Our teams are people that own their own companies. So we actually have team members that we hire on a consult basis, and we train them specifically to our needs. And then we've got, our own, myself and Joseph, our partner, my partner, we do a lot of this ourselves as well. But the loss mitigation teams, the property preservation teams, those are all separate companies that we outsource to. More questions?
What do you teach in your classes, your workshop?
Everything. It's a 3-day, very intensive, hands-on workshop. We teach you how to find notes. We teach you how to fund notes. We teach you all of the due diligence steps and processes. We give you checklists. We give you all of the tools that we actually use. My business partner developed when he first started in this business. It can be very daunting to take a tape of 200 assets and really kind of narrow it down to focus on certain, the ones that we want to do due diligence. And so he developed his proprietary software that we use to be able to filter a lot of those notes down based on our preset criteria. And we give you the single note version of that at the workshop. And then we give you our team. We actually give you our whole team and the people that we use, and we make introductions. We role play. We look at tapes. We look at collateral files. We learn how to process all of that. And then we do a whole day of hands-on, due diligence and actually walk through the steps. So we actually teach you by the end of the workshop. You should be able to go out and comfortably have at least all of the steps, to go out and buy a note yourself. I strongly urge people, in lieu of doing that on their own, that they partner with somebody at least the first time, preferably the first 2 times, just to get their feet wet and kind of mitigate any exposure. But we do equip you with all of the tools that you're going to need to be a successful note investor. That's part of our give back. Because there are so many people out there that don't have, the education to become financially free. They know they want to be, they want to have a nest egg and they don't know how to get to it. And so for me, having gone through 2007, that's really part of my give back, which is why we do the workshops, to educate people so that they can be successful in this space and not get hurt.
Is it possible that any of these workshops or whatnot can be like recorded, and for those of us who may not be able to come, to be able to still participate in something like this, so we can better educate ourselves? Because as a person, I mean, you started at the bottom and now you're back on top, and you're your own, you're a success story. So for those of us who are trying to get into the business, who may not be able to physically attend a workshop, how do we access the workshop information that you present, basically?
There is availability. If you want, go ahead and send me an email. I do have an online version. I only have the online version because of that question. There are plenty of people that have said, I have a new family or whatever, and they can't get out to California. I'm currently in Florida right now. I actually just had our workshop this last weekend here in Florida. But because a lot of people have said, can't you do an online version? I did. I answered that call, and they are the previous versions of the workshop. So they're the recordings of the workshops. And you can go online at cashflowchick.com and go under training, and there is an online version. It's a flat fee. It's one time for life. For every single video that I do from here on out, you get that. It gets uploaded, and you get that for free. And I did that to answer the call. And I don't profess to be. I don't want to be a guru. I don't want to be. I'm not an educator. I'm a note investor who tries to help people to better their lives. And so the online version was an answer to that call.
A quick question here. So if you're into the flipping business, can you do the note business and the flipping business at the same time? And my second question is, if you have to start a note business, do you have to form another entity, or you have to use the same? Can you use both the real estate entity for your note entity? Can you use the same?
I don't know if it's the volume maybe from your side, but I'm having trouble. I've got my speakers turned all the way up, and I can't. I'm so sorry. I could not hear your questions.
The question was, if you already have a real estate LLC set up, do you have to set up a separate entity specifically geared towards note purchasing?
No, not at all. That's you can invest in notes as an individual if you wanted to. I don't recommend that, but you could if you really wanted to. So no, if you've already got an LLC set up as your real estate investing vehicle, you can absolutely do notes through that LLC.
Okay.
Okie dokie.
Anybody else?
Paige, my name's Cynthia Watson. Nice to meet you. When is your...
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, darling. Where's your, when's your next workshop?
My next workshop is going to be in lovely Southern California in July 20th through the 22nd. And as I said, it's 3 days. It's intensive, hands-on, and we feed you lunch, by the way, because we like to really be able to spend time with you, not only in an education setting, but also as a networking setting. So, you can network with us, you can network with other investors. And so July 20, 21, 22 is the next workshop in Orange County, California.
Whereabouts in Orange County? I lived in LA for 25 years.
Oh, terrific. I believe it's going to be in Costa Mesa. We're just finalizing the contracts now. I believe it's going to be at the Ayers Hotel in Costa Mesa.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Thank you.
Certainly. Anybody else?
When you,
All right, well,
oh, sorry. I was gonna ask one question. When you buy notes, can you try to be specific as to a region or an area if you only feel comfortable buying them where you can go look at them? Or is it better to try to buy all over because you can get a better deal?
the answer is really, it depends on you as the investor. For us, we buy across the country. However, we don't buy, believe it or not, I don't buy in California. And the reason that I don't buy in California is because, again, I like to be very conservative, and I like to mitigate my risk. So that one note that's going to cost me $200,000 or $300,000 in California, I can take that same $200,000 or $300,000 and put it in, 4, 5, 6, 7 different baskets across the country, thereby mitigating my risk. I also don't invest in New York or New Jersey. And then Cook County, Illinois. And the reason that I don't is because it doesn't fit my timeline. Those are judicial foreclosure states, and New York and New Jersey take a minimum of 36 months to even get a court date to start your foreclosure process, which is awful. Yeah, so that doesn't work for me. I will invest in Cook County if the asset manager has let me know that the foreclosure's already started at least 18 months ahead of time. But otherwise, I invest across the entire country, and it's just a matter of really, knowing your numbers and sticking to those numbers. And if it's a deal, we'll do it. And if it fits our timeline, we'll do it. Pennsylvania is also becoming very difficult. It's a very difficult state now, so we're shying away from Pennsylvania. But other than that, we buy everywhere else.
How's Texas? We're a non-judicial state, right?
Yes, you are. You guys have express lanes. I love it.
For a lot of stuff.
Exactly.
Closures were quick.
Careful.
Yes. Yes, you are. And we do get a lot of Texas notes, believe it or not. And we've had great success there. So it's just a matter, but we are beholden. Understand, if we ask our asset managers only send us Texas, then we may be waiting a while. If we tell them several different states, at least they'll be able to send us those several different states, and we're not narrowing our field of opportunity. Again, just know your states, and that's another thing. As a matter of fact, if you want, if you do send me that email, just remind me, and I will send you what I have a judicial versus non-judicial foreclosure state packet that has a list of all the states. It gives you all of it, whether it's judicial, non-judicial, and then if you click on it, it's a PDF interactive. So if you click on the link, it will, or on the state, it'll take you to all of the different guidelines and the ins and outs of that state's foreclosure process and how long it's going to take. So just remind me when you send me that email, and I'll send that to you.
Okay, thank you, darling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any more questions?
Just one quick one. Is there a limit of how many notes you could put into your entity? Like, is it something that needs to be spread out, or because it's not exactly a title? So.
No, there's no limit on how many notes you can buy. Some states you're going to be able to get away with, like for instance, Ohio. You have to become a registered debt buyer in Ohio if you buy 5 or more assets in any one given name. Understand it's a government entity, so that watches this, so they might be a little slow on the uptake to catch up to you, but they will eventually catch up to you. Georgia, for instance, that's another one. You have to be a registered debt buyer, and they will catch up to you quickly. Just beware. Know what that state's regulations are, but no, if you're an entity or even an individual person, individual people, as you know, can only have like 10 mortgages, I believe it is, when they're buying and holding properties. So for their turnkey properties, they can only carry 10 mortgages. With this, you can buy as many as you want.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I think that's it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Paige, and I'll have anybody that wants your email, I'll have them text me and I'll send it to them so that they can get in touch with you.
Okay, terrific. That sounds great. And I really appreciate you having me in this evening. I'm glad that we got the technical difficulties issued out and are flattened out. So whoever helped, thank you. That made life a lot easier, and we started on time, which is great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks, Paige.